Number 13. Richard Evans. A seasoned NYPD cop's career crumbled in late 2016 after he was accused of drinking and driving on the job. 44-year-old Richard Evans was a 15-year veteran of the force when a witness reported that he was acting drunk while investigating a disturbance in the Bronx. The trouble reportedly began when Evans and his rookie partner, Officer Juan Rivera, responded to a loud noise complaint at a nearby residence during the midnight shift. According to court documents, Evans and Rivera visited the apartment of 22-year-old Dimitris Jimenez, who complied with the officer's request to turn the volume down. Jimenez watched through his peephole as Evans and Rivera hung around in the hallway for an unusual amount of time afterward. Court records state that Rivera asked Evans why they were still at the address about 5 minutes after the call ended, but that Evans didn't respond. Jimenez soon exited his apartment and asked the cops the same question. Witnesses noticed that Evans' face was flushed and that the officer appeared to be leaning against the wall to maintain his balance. Evans allegedly asked Jimenez if he had a problem and wedged his foot in the young man's door to prevent him from closing it. He was accused of keeping his foot in place for at least 20 minutes while carrying on an argument with Jimenez and other people who were at the apartment, during which time a witness dialed 911 and reported that Evans seemed drunk. In the meantime, a bystander pulled out their phone and began recording the interaction. During the tense altercation, Jimenez asked Rivera to get in touch with a supervisor, and in response, Evans allegedly tried to call for backup. However, he was unable to explain why he wanted additional units at the scene. By the time Evans arrived back at the precinct, several of his superiors were there waiting for him. They noticed a distinct odor of booze and found him unfit to perform his job duties. According to court records, Evans claimed that he had a glass of wine over dinner hours earlier, but he seemed far more drunk to his colleagues than a person normally would be if that was truly all they had to drink. As a result, Evans was stripped of his gun and badge as a deeper investigation was carried out. He was later indicted on charges of official misconduct and driving while intoxicated. Number 12. Jennifer Fichter. Before she was a convicted criminal, Jennifer Christine Fichter worked as a school teacher in Lakeland, Florida, but her career as an educator ended in April 2014 when she was accused of having inappropriate relations with at least 3 of her students. According to a statement given to law enforcement, one encounter occurred in Fichter's car behind a hotel. 2 other victims came forward following the initial allegations, and the disgraced teacher was ultimately charged with 37 crimes. Prosecutors accused Fichter of making both the conscious choice to do wrong and also lying about it when confronted by one of the victims' mothers. According to the state, the former educator's selfish actions put at least one of her victims in the traumatic position of feeling obligated to keep their illicit relationship a secret from his family. In a recorded phone call, Fichter could be heard telling one victim's mother that she still wanted to be with the young man after the teen's parents discovered the relationship. But the most damning allegation by far was that Fichter had gotten pregnant by one of her victims, who knew that the teacher had received an abortion and felt powerless to confide in anyone in his life about it. Family members of the victim only learned the disturbing truth much later on. Fichter pleaded guilty to all 37 charges in early 2015. Her attorney pleaded with the judge for leniency, pointing out that 2 of the victims' parents supported a merciful sentence. Meanwhile, the prosecution implored the judge to spare no mercy against the ex-teacher and to instead levy a sentence similar to what a man would face for the same charges. In the state's opinion, it would only be fair for Fichter to spend at least 25 years in prison. But the judge sentenced her to 22 years behind bars. And according to records, Fichter is slated to be released in 2034 at the age of 50. Number 11. Kristen Davenport. 27-year-old Kristen Davenport of Columbus, Georgia, had barely made a dent in her teaching career when she landed in a Muskogee County courtroom in April 2019 for allegedly having inappropriate relations with one of her students. She was charged with 3 counts of assaulting a person in custody and was hauled off to jail pending her arraignment hearing. During a public conference, District Superintendent David Lewis revealed that Davenport was removed from the classroom after officials received an anonymous tip about her alleged crimes. The ousted teacher's arrest marked the third time in less than 2 weeks that a district employee was accused of committing indecent or criminal acts on school property, leading to widespread concerns among parents about the safety of their teens. One of the previous 2 arrests involved similar allegations against a substitute teacher, while another former substitute was accused of simple battery and trespassing. Lewis reassured the public that all 3 recently charged employees had been thoroughly vetted prior to being hired by the school district. And without revealing too many details about Davenport's arrest, he pointed out that it's impossible to predict human behavior and that the accused former educator was entitled to the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. While the outcome of the case is unclear, a LinkedIn profile belonging to a woman who appears to be Davenport lists her current profession as a maid. Number 10. Laura Ramos. If 32-year-old former schoolteacher Laura Caladio Ramos had been convicted as charged following disturbing accusations of inappropriate relations with her students, she could have faced 25 years behind bars. The former educator from Bridgeport, Connecticut, was arrested in 2017 after allegations surfaced that she assaulted 2 victims and violated an order of protection over a 5-month period starting in December 2016. According to her accusers, Ramos met one of her victims in her vehicle and carried out a separate tryst with another teen in the electrical room of a local restaurant. She allegedly complained to at least one of the young men about not getting enough from her partner at home. And following one of the sick encounters, she sent a text message to the victim saying that he was the best she ever had. The second victim came forward after the first batch of allegations surfaced. He claimed that Ramos had opened up to him about her marital problems and that she complained about her partner not wanting intimacy from her. And while taking the teen's report, a detective noted that Ramos allegedly reported to school the next day and acted as if nothing had happened. Ramos resigned following her arrest and ultimately pleaded no contest to second-degree assault and violating a protective order. As a result, she was sentenced to the minimum term of 5 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. Number 9. Franchesco Spanesi. Churchgoers in Tuscany, Italy were beyond shocked in 2021 when a well-respected medical school dropout turned priest was accused of stealing thousands of euros in church donations to finance a series of drug-fueled orgies at his home. Father Franchesco Spanesi, who was 40 years old at the time, implicated himself in at least some of his bad deeds by confessing to a handful of illicit acts, including supplying drugs to guests at his wild parties. In their efforts to corroborate the allegations against the disgraced priest, authorities reportedly interviewed at least 200 people who'd attended Spanesi's house parties over a several-year period. And during that same time span, Spanesi allegedly withdrew at least 100,000 euros from his parish's bank account. Even after the bishop cut off his access to the account, he continued to steal by skimming from the collection plate and directly requesting cash donations from parishioners who were apparently none the wiser about where the money was actually going. Spanesi allegedly ordered party favors, including cocaine and GHB, from online suppliers. He and his roommate were also accused of searching hookup websites for new party guests. The priest was already on house arrest amid an ongoing investigation when the most damning allegations were put forth. According to authorities, he failed to disclose his HIV-positive status to multiple partners and was accused of knowingly passing the virus on to at least 2 partygoers. Before his secret double life was exposed, Spanesi had a pristine reputation. But after realizing that he couldn't hack it as a doctor in training, he framed himself in the most respectable light possible by dedicating himself to religion. Most college dropouts aren't fortunate enough to be known for their brilliance, but Spanesi managed to achieve that feat only to ruin it for himself a handful of years later. After the investigation wrapped up in late 2021, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for drug dealing, trafficking, and misappropriation. He was also ordered to repay all the money he stole from the church, which likely means he'll be pretty busy looking for work as soon as he gets out of prison. Number 8. John C. Murphy. Former Brevard County, Florida Judge John C. Murphy seemed all too aware that he'd crossed a line after he got into a violent altercation with a public defender during a court hearing in 2014. In a shocking exchange that was captured on camera, Murphy became noticeably agitated with Assistant Public Defender Andrew Weinstock, who refused to waive his client's right to a speedy trial. Instead of accepting Weinstock's position, Murphy raised his voice and yelled that he'd throw a rock at the attorney if he had one. He further ordered Weinstock to stop peeing him off and instructed the lawyer to sit down. Weinstock refused to cower to Murphy and reminded the enraged judge of his right to defend his client. He was 100% correct after all, but his assertion only seemed to further fuel Murphy's temper, which eventually reached an explosive level. Then, in a jaw-dropping display of unprofessional behavior, Murphy challenged Weinstock to go out back and fight, and said that he'd beat the lawyer's butt. After doing his best to remain civil throughout the heated discussion, Weinstock took the judge up on his offer to duke it out behind the courtroom walls. The men disappeared into a hallway and could be heard knocking each other around and shouting at each other while a stunned courtroom sat and waited for whatever happened next. When Murphy returned to the courtroom, everyone in attendance erupted into applause. They were apparently ready to get on with their day and seemed fed up waiting for the grown men to sort out their childish disagreement. Murphy took a much more composed tone as he made a comment about how he foresaw himself being absent from the courtroom in the near future, and he wasn't wrong. The incident quickly fell under the scrutiny of the Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission, which recommended a 120-day suspension, a $50,000 fine, and required participation in a mental health program. But the state Supreme Court shot down the decision and removed Murphy from the bench entirely. In the ruling, the court described the ex-judge's behavior as egregious and an embarrassment to the state's judicial system. According to court documents, Weinstock and Murphy accused each other of throwing the first punch. One witness reported seeing Murphy grab Weinstock's shirt collar right before the hallway door closed, concealing the men from view. We'll likely never know who struck the initial blow, but as a judge, Murphy unquestioningly showed an unacceptable lack of judgment and restraint in his conduct. Weinstock described a volatile and high-stress relationship with Murphy, but he reportedly said that he didn't expect their differences to come to physical blows. Murphy blamed his behavior on post-traumatic stress disorder and other factors, including fatigue and the recent passing of his father. And there may be some merit to these claims, but it didn't make Murphy's conduct any more acceptable in the eyes of the Supreme Court justices who made the decision to pull him from the bench. Number 7. Jose Joey Torres. When it comes to politicians, it often seems like there are more rotten apples than ripe ones, and included among the rotten ranks is former Paterson, New Jersey Mayor Jose Joey Torres, who was sentenced to prison time in 2017 after he admitted to financing renovations at a family-owned property with city funds. According to news reports, Torres tasked city workers with remodeling a warehouse where his daughter and nephew were running a liquor distribution business. Taxpayers footed the labor bill, which was falsely labeled as overtime work on the city's financial records. Torres was sentenced to 5 years behind bars, but he served little more than a year before being cut loose. As a contingency of his guilty plea to committing official misconduct, though, the 64-year-old was banned from ever running for public office again. However, he allegedly ignored the fine print in 2022 when he ran for mayor of Paterson. He even had campaign posters printed in hopes of garnering enough support to land back into his previous shoes as the city's leader. In keeping with the rules, the city clerk rejected the ousted politician's petition for a second term. But Torres wasn't about to take the decision lying down. Instead, he sued city officials, who also refused to back down. Torres hasn't given up his fight to run for mayor, but he appears to be losing at his own game. In September 2023, a grand jury indicted the ex-politician on a fourth-degree criminal contempt of court charge. Describing Torres' actions as bold, State Attorney General Matthew Platkin accused the disgraced former mayor of flouting a court order and attempting to strong-arm the city clerk through the lawsuit he filed after being denied access to the campaign trail. If convicted as charged, Torres could face an 18-month prison sentence and a fine of up to $10,000. Number 6. John Fay. 25-year-old school teacher, former beauty queen and devout Catholic Irene Garza was last seen alive on her way to confession in McAllen, Texas in April 1960. The beloved elementary school educator's lifeless body was found dumped in a canal 5 days later. She'd been assaulted, suffocated to death with a plastic bag, and discarded like trash by a cold-blooded killer who managed to fly under the radar for over a half-century before an arrest was finally made in 2016. 82-year-old former priest John Fay hardly looked like a heartless murderer as he slowly rolled into court on a walker to finally face justice for killing Garza. The frail octogenarian swore up and down that authorities had the wrong man throughout the entire duration of his case. But prosecutors were 100% certain that they'd finally nailed Garza's killer, especially keeping in mind that Fay would have been much more capable of carrying out the gruesome act nearly 60 years earlier, when he was just 27 years old. In fact, detectives had suspected Fay of murdering Garza right from the get-go, but they were left with no choice but to let him walk free early on in the case when they failed to secure enough evidence to charge him with any crimes. The case went cold for years to come, but it always remained in the back of community members' minds. Investigators began re-examining the case in 2004, but it would be another 12 years before Fay was finally arrested. The charges came after new evidence was presented to a grand jury, which green-lighted the prosecutor's proposal to move forward with formal charges while Fay was still alive. In addition to new physical evidence connecting Fay to the crime scene, 2 fellow priests finally came forward and admitted to knowing that Fay had murdered Garza. Consequently, prosecutors accused local and church officials of concealing Fay's actions in an attempt to spare the church's reputation. But the writing was on the wall, according to the state, which was quick to point out during Fay's trial that he was sent to a reformatory for troubled priests after Garza's murder. And despite his checkered behavioral record, he managed to move up within the ranks of the clergy, eventually landing in a supervisory position that involved approving assignments for other priests. Perhaps not surprisingly, at least one of the priests Fay oversaw was also eventually convicted of committing horrific crimes against innocent victims. In a long overdue delivery of justice after walking free and living a complete lie for the vast majority of his adult years, Fay was found guilty of Garza's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, but only served about 4 years before he was found dead in his cell from cardiac arrest in 2020, at the age of 86. In the eyes of some, there was no way of truly holding him accountable for his crimes at such an advanced age. After all, it was pretty clear that Fay wouldn't spend even a fraction of the lifetime in prison that he deserved. But it was relieving to know that he was finally held accountable, and that he served at least some time behind bars for his actions. It was also satisfying that his continued denials of guilt failed to secure his release from prison following his conviction. Fay maintained his innocence until his dying day and was in the process of appealing his case when he took his last breath behind prison walls. Number 5. Vivian Palana. Generally speaking, people who hold high-ranking public positions are expected to conduct themselves in the utmost respectable manner at all times, including in their personal lives. But some leaders and officials believe that how they act on their personal time shouldn't be considered a reflection of their professional capabilities. A Colombian judge named Vivian Palana appears to fall into the latter category based on a criticism she received from her colleagues for her behavior on social media and during Zoom video meetings. Palana had already been warned repeatedly to stop posting photos of herself in her underwear on social media, and that was before she was reprimanded in late 2022 for laying in bed and smoking a cigarette with minimal clothing on during a Zoom call. A 33-second video that was captured during the meeting appeared to show the judge puffing away in a top and panties while lounging in her bed. And to make matters even more disturbing, her shockingly casual demeanor was recorded during a conversation about whether or not to grant bail to a defendant who was accused of planting a car bomb in a domestic terrorism attack. Up until that point, Palana had responded to repeated warnings to clean up her act on Instagram by defending her right to express herself. She described herself as braless and open-minded, and argued that she had a right to present herself however she wanted on her personal social media accounts. Palana even went as far as outright stating that she refused to change her behavior. But a video of the scantily clad judge smoking in bed appeared to be the tipping point that led to her suspension. It's unclear whether Palana knew she was on camera when the footage was captured, but her colleagues argued that she should have conducted herself more professionally either way. In its ruling, a committee from Colombia's National Commission of Judicial Ethics described Palana's behavior as deplorable and noted that she had the amenities to make herself presentable. She was accused of showing contempt toward her peers in all factions of the courtroom, including members of the prosecutor's office and those acting on behalf of criminal defense teams. Palana claimed that the video was misleading and taken out of context, arguing that it was recorded after she laid down during an anxiety attack. But her past behavior made her claims seem doubtful, leading the committee to conclude that she was trying to weasel her way out of trouble after she went too far and realized she was facing serious consequences for her actions. Number 4. Mark Benavides. A former Texas lawyer who exploited his criminal clients may spend the rest of his natural life behind bars after overwhelming evidence showed that he coerced at least 6 vulnerable victims into providing him with physical favors in exchange for help with their cases. Mark Benavides acted like he had his victims' best interests in mind when he pressured them into some quid pro quo action over a 6-year period starting in 2009. But allegedly, he only really cared about satisfying his own twisted appetite. According to authorities, the crooked San Antonio-based attorney pounced during meetings with his clients in private settings, including hotel rooms, court conference rooms, and his office. Benavides was charged with human trafficking in April 2016, based on allegations that he traded legal representation for intimacy. He argued in court that the interactions were consensual, but several of his accusers testified that he threatened to sabotage their criminal cases by representing them poorly in court if they didn't give him what he wanted. During a search of Benavides' property, authorities recovered nearly 250 DVDs containing homemade explicit material, including encounters with his accusers. Benavides was convicted on 6 counts of human trafficking in April 2018. And he's currently serving an 80-year prison term with eligibility for parole after 30 years. Following the outcome of the case, Bexar County prosecutors put a notice out to the public encouraging any additional victims to come forward. Authorities vow to continue investigating the former attorney's alleged crimes until he's brought to justice for all of his wrongdoings. Number 3. Alex Crowe. In a case out of America's Deep South that could perhaps be best described as equal parts scandalous and bizarre, a young priest stands accused of fleeing the country with a young woman he groomed in anticipation of a future together. The twisted saga began when 30-year-old father Alex Crowe met his 18-year-old love interest who was in high school at the time. In July of 2023, the pair allegedly ran off to Rome, where they thought they'd be able to pursue their relationship in peace. But the story quickly made news headlines across the US and beyond, drawing copious amounts of unwanted attention to the illicit pair. When the scandal first broke, many internet users gushed over Crowe's good looks, earning him the nickname of the heartthrob priest. But to the family of his young lover and others who cared about the woman and feared that Crowe was keeping her in Italy against her will, there was no room to make light of the situation. The case began as a law enforcement investigation out of Mobile, where the disgraced priest was accused of targeting his much younger girlfriend and violating his vow of celibacy. Detectives discovered a collection of love letters that the couple exchanged prior to their departure, including a handwritten note by Crowe telling the young woman that they were married and that Jesus told him to flee to Italy with her. According to Mobile County Sheriff Paul Birch, Crowe may have taken his lover to Italy to have an exorcism performed. In a statement, he described Crowe as being obsessed with demons and exorcisms. But at some point, authorities began to suspect that the priest was keeping his lover in Italy for other self-serving reasons, while living as a fugitive from the law. In August 2023, a lawyer representing the family of the woman who went on the run with Crowe revealed that she'd located the teen after several of the woman's relatives physically traveled to Italy and tracked her down. But the attorney claimed that Crowe was refusing to let his girlfriend leave Italy. The teen's family accused Crow of taking away her cell phone and taking other measures to prevent her from leaving the country. He also allegedly went out of his way to isolate the young woman from any contact with loved ones. The family's lawyer further claimed that Crow refused to cooperate when confronted by the girl's family members. And to make matters even more disturbing, families back in Alabama have come forward with other horrific allegations of misconduct against Crow, including claims that he paid certain students to attend his confessions. The scandal came to an unceremonious end in November 2023 when Crow and his lover returned to the United States of their own free will. According to police, the woman refused to answer questions about the relationship, and because she's over 18, they have little power to interfere with the situation. The Mobile County District Attorney declined to pursue criminal charges, and the pair are free to live as they please for the time being. But it's likely safe to assume that Crow's priesthood career is over, and that he's probably going to have to look for another line of work. Number 2. Brian Lovel. In a case that only seems to be getting increasingly bizarre and complicated as the investigation plays out, an Oklahoma judge is accused of being involved in at least 2 shootings in 2 states. The strange drama began to unfold in September 2023 when the not-so-honorable Brian Lovel of Garfield County was identified as the prime suspect in a string of road rage incidents in Austin, Texas. Police initially responded to reports of shots fired at an intersection in broad daylight and received a description of the suspect's white SUV from witnesses. Then, about an hour and a half later, the same driver, later identified as Lovel, was accused of trying to push a woman's car into oncoming traffic roughly 2 miles from the original crime scene. According to authorities, Lovel allegedly rear-ended the victim's vehicle repeatedly following an argument about one another's driving. The woman told responding officers that the suspect had tried cutting her off in traffic, but when confronted by police, Lovel denied shooting a gun, even though a weapon matching the shell casings was found in his vehicle. Lovel tried to play the victim and said that he would have had no reason to fire the weapon. His denial didn't work though, and the judge of 12 years was arrested for reckless driving and firing a gun. He was ordered to undergo a mental evaluation within a week of his initial court hearing and returned to Oklahoma after posting a $10,000 bond. Garfield County District Judge Paul Woodward expressed shock at the news of his colleague's arrest. He told the Enid News and Eagle that he'd known Lovel for many years on both a personal and professional level, and that he wasn't going to jump to any conclusions until he had more information about the case. Less than 2 months after the incident, court documents obtained by Oklahoma-based news station KFOR revealed that Lovel had recently been connected to a drive-by shooting at the home of one of his relatives months earlier. Lovel's brother-in-law, Kenneth Marks, seemed shocked to learn that Lovel might have been responsible for the shooting. He told a news outlet that his son had noticed an unfamiliar car near their house in Bison while looking out the window. The driver fired multiple shots, which narrowly missed Kenneth's son's head and struck a wall, window, and oven. Marks admitted that the shooting was undoubtedly a targeted act and that he and Lovel had a strained relationship, but he claimed that the two hadn't spoken in 10 or 15 years. The wayward judge was apparently not someone who came to mind when Marks thought about who might have committed the disturbing act. 2 days after the shooting, Lovel reported his .40 caliber handgun stolen. He claimed that the weapon was taken from his truck outside the courthouse where he oversaw legal cases sometime during a 2-week period in early 2023. And when he was questioned about the shooting months later, he told investigators that he was at church at the time of the incident. According to the most recent update on the case, authorities have requested GPS and attendance records in an effort to determine whether Lovel is telling the truth about his whereabouts. For now, though, the investigation is ongoing. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear even more stories, stay tuned for some extra content that you might have missed. Number 1. Greek priest gets freaky. A 49-year-old Orthodox priest from the Greek island of Rhodes became one of the latest controversial church leaders to make international news headlines in 2023 when an Estonian tourist accused him of anointing his privates with holy oil. According to local media reports, the 30-year-old male victim told the Hellenic police that the creepy clergy member made the unwelcome advance when he returned to an Orthodox church to retrieve a crucifix. He'd accidentally left a crucifix there the day before during a visit with his girlfriend. He claimed that the priest had sent him a text message reminding him that he left the cross behind after buying it at the monastery's gift shop. The priest allegedly told the tourist that he had a special gift for the man and led him to a separate room where he asked the visitor to pull his pants down and proceeded to slather his nether region with holy oil. In his complaint to law enforcement, the tourist reported feeling confused by the situation. Unsure of how to react, he admitted that he didn't initially ask the priest to stop massaging him with the holy oil. He told investigators that he wasn't sure if the priest was performing a valid ritual or if he was being abused. The man further described feeling confused and embarrassed by the situation and said that he decided to report it after realizing that it shouldn't have happened in the first place. The priest reportedly claimed that he carried out the act because the man had a rash, but as a result, he was charged with insulting the visitor's dignity. Number 15. Patricia Ell. A bikini-clad grandma named Patricia Ell found herself in some hot water back in 2015 when she rear-ended a Ford Mustang with her BMW in Naples, Florida. She was driving her 10-year-old grandson home from a day at the pool when the crash occurred. A local news crew captured the strange scene on camera as Collier County Sheriff's deputies administered a sobriety test to the barely clothed woman. She smelled strongly of alcohol, according to an arrest report, and she allegedly bombed the sobriety test. Police accused Ell of having a blood alcohol content of more than twice the legal limit and charged her with driving under the influence. When a reporter asked the grandmother if she knew why she was being taken into custody, she said no. Ell was sentenced to probation and banned from drinking alcohol for a year, and apparently the message didn't sink in because she was busted for drinking in 2016 when her blood alcohol content tested at more than twice the legal limit during a visit to her probation officer. Ell managed to sort out her legal issues, and in 2017 she opened up to Inside Edition about her scandalous run-ins with the law. She said that several people offered to buy the bikini she was wearing when she got her DUI, but that she held on to the two-piece. Patricia also admitted that she still drives around in a bikini, but that she wears a cover-up now, which perhaps isn't as crazy as it sounds, considering she lives in Florida. Number 14. Janet Strickland. 72-year-old William Strickland was walking outside his Chicago home to catch a bus to dialysis treatment in 2013 when someone fatally shot him seemingly out of nowhere. An investigation uncovered evidence that Strickland's wife, 64-year-old Janet Strickland, had persuaded the couple's grandson, also named William Strickland, to shoot his grandfather so they could access his money. The younger Strickland used his grandfather's gun to shoot the victim 6 times. He then took cash from the victim's wallet and used it to buy a tattoo, new shoes, and a phone. Strickland and his grandmother also allegedly bought a car, home furniture, and other things with the money, but they didn't get to enjoy the influx of funds for very long before they were arrested for murder. Janet Strickland caught an additional charge of solicitation of murder. William Strickland was convicted of murder and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Janet was also convicted and received an 18-year sentence. Number 13. Roxanne Record. When Roxanne Record caught her 4-year-old granddaughter sneaking a sip of whiskey in the kitchen of her Baton Rouge, Louisiana home in 2021, she allegedly made the girl finish the bottle, which may have been more than half full. The defenseless little girl's mother, Kaja Record, was accused of failing to intervene as her daughter drank herself to death at Roxanne's command. Tragically, she passed away with a blood alcohol level of 0.680, more than 8 times the legal limit for adults. Police began piecing together what happened after responding to a call about an unresponsive child at the home. Paramedics tried to save the girl's life, but it was too late. Kaja Record reportedly told officers that she saw Roxanne take the little girl into a hallway with a bottle of whiskey and that the bottle was empty when they returned. But officers claim that she gave inconsistent statements, so her exact role in the situation is unclear. An arrest warrant states that Kaja tried to put her daughter in the bathtub when she saw that she had passed out, but she failed to dial 911. Roxanne allegedly claimed that she wanted to take full responsibility for the needless tragedy, admitting that she knows she messed up, that it went too far, and that she ruined everyone's lives, according to Law and Crime. Both Roxanne and Kaja face a first-degree murder charge in the horrific case. Their cases appear to be ongoing. Since the arrest, the little girl's aunt, Ebony Record, has spoken up, claiming that Roxanne abused all her kids as children and went on to abuse her grandchildren. Ebony told local station WAFB that she partially blames herself for not speaking up because if someone had, the child's life may have been kept out of harm's way. She encouraged others not to make the same mistake and to report abuse when they know it's going on. Number 12. Edna Fay Daniels. 30-year-old Ryan O'Neill Woodruff was already out on bond for allegedly killing two family members when his grandmother, 78-year-old Edna Fay Daniels, was accused of helping him cover up yet another murder. According to law enforcement officials, the first two murders occurred in South Carolina in 2021. In early 2023, Woodruff was accused of killing 18-year-old Tyquez Demetrius Walker in Greentown. Daniels allegedly witnessed Walker's murder and then lied to the police about what she knew. In fact, the murder happened inside the senior citizen's home, according to an arrest warrant out of Georgetown County. The warrant also states that Daniels knowingly provided false information to investigators on multiple occasions during questioning and that she helped to conceal the crime. She faces one count of obstruction of justice and one count of accessory to murder after the fact. Number 11. Osia Panades. 82-year-old grandmother of 6, Osia Panades, was pretty much the last person Australian authorities might have suspected of smuggling cocaine if they didn't have a solid reason to believe she was involved. The senior citizen, described by her neighbours in Adelaide as a lovely lady who loves to sew, was nabbed by law enforcement in early 2023 for allegedly co-conspiring with her 30-year-old grandson, Kostas Panades, to import $3.2 million worth of cocaine. The octogenarian is accused of being part of a drug syndicate that was attempting to get its hands on 8 kilos, 17.6 pounds of the drug. Panades has maintained her innocence so far throughout the case, claiming she had no idea why she was in trouble and insisting that she had never even touched a cigarette, let alone cocaine or any other illegal substance. She told the press that police found a box filled with drugs at her residence, but that she was unaware of its presence prior to the raid on her home. Community members are reportedly shocked by Effie's arrest and are having a hard time believing that she knowingly participated in the drug trade. The case is ongoing. Number 10. Margaret Bateman. Just days into the 2023 new year, a 68-year-old Irish grandmother named Margaret Bateman was arrested for allegedly verbally abusing Ukrainian refugees at a hotel in Cork. The Garda, Irish police, went to the hotel after receiving reports about a disturbance, and they witnessed the woman's behavior firsthand. Detective Nigel Welton told the court that Bateman was demanding to know how many Ukrainian nationals were staying in the area and how much it was costing Irish taxpayers. She was also accused of calling the refugees criminals. Welton asked her to stop, but she continued to make a scene, as he put it. After several attempts to get Bateman to control herself, Welton felt he had no choice but to arrest her. In court, Bateman's defense lawyer argued that his client didn't accuse the refugees of being criminals, but that she simply asked if they had been vetted. But Welton insisted that he heard Bateman clearly and that he was speaking the truth about what she said, and the elderly woman's history seemed to speak for itself. By the time she went to court for her most recent alleged crimes, she had already been arrested for similar incidents, as well as her repeated refusal to wear a COVID mask. In 2021, she was sentenced to 3 months of jail time for her mask-related convictions. Judge James McNulty, who oversaw one of her cases, suspected that Bateman was under the influence of people with a warped and non-conformist agenda. He sentenced her to 16 weeks in prison, with half the sentence suspended as long as she stays away from hotels accommodating refugees and asylum seekers. Number 9. Anna Mae Blessing. 92-year-old Anna Mae Blessing made headlines in 2018 when she was accused of killing her 72-year-old son, Thomas Blessing, in an effort to stop him from putting her into an assisted living facility. She pondered the matter for a few days before deciding what needed to be done. Anna May hid 2 handguns in the pocket of her robe and fired multiple bullets into Thomas's face and neck at the home they shared in Fountain Hills, Arizona. The victim's 57-year-old girlfriend got into a struggle with Blessing and eventually got her to drop the gun, at which point the murderous matron pulled out her backup pistol and pointed it at the girlfriend. Luckily, the quick-thinking younger woman knocked it out of Blessing's hand. Blessing was sitting in her recliner when police arrived and took her into custody. During questioning, she said that she had planned to take her own life after shooting her son, but was unable to after having the guns wrestled away from her. She also explained that Thomas and his girlfriend were ignoring her after returning home from a vacation and that they treated her badly. Blessing was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and kidnapping. She passed away in jail hospice in early 2019, just weeks before her case was set to go to trial. Number 8. Carolyn Manning. In early 2023, a SWAT team raided the Monroe, Louisiana home of 20-year-old Carolyn Manning, a suspected member of the Deuce 5 gang, armed with a warrant to arrest him for 4 counts of distribution of a controlled dangerous substance and conspiracy to distribute narcotics. The young man's grandmother, 58-year-old Carolyn Manning, told police that Kylan had barricaded himself in his room and was refusing to come out. A brief standoff ensued, during which Carolyn allegedly interfered by trying to walk past the cops despite being instructed not to. She was arrested due to the distracting nature of her behavior and was charged with interfering with a law enforcement investigation. And Kylan was also taken into custody after the standoff. During the raid, authorities found a loaded handgun, several bags of marijuana, and scales in Kylan's bedroom. In addition to the charges detailed in the warrant, he was charged with resisting an officer, illegal carrying of a weapon in the presence of narcotics, and a conspiracy-related offense. Number 7. Kim Taylor. A Massachusetts grandmother named Kim Taylor was just trying to give back to her community by volunteering at a farm for therapy animals in 2021, but the 73-year-old paid a heavy price for her good deed when a sheep suddenly rammed her while she tended to some animals alone. It's unclear what triggered the attack at the farm, which is located in Bolton, roughly 40 miles, 64.4 kilometers outside Boston. By the time anyone discovered Taylor, she was seriously injured. She went into cardiac arrest as first responders arrived on the scene. Taylor was rushed to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead from her injuries. The senior citizen was a treasured volunteer at the farm who had been donating her time for more than a year before the tragedy occurred. According to experts, rams, or male sheep, occasionally become aggressive, but fatal attacks on humans are extremely rare, making Taylor's fate a highly unlikely tragedy. When the story broke, authorities were still trying to decide what to do with the ram that attacked the elderly volunteer. Number 6. Marie Sally Dufresne. During the early morning hours one day in 2021, 22-year-old Hunter Mason Johnson allegedly drove through a construction zone in St. Charles Parish, Louisiana, striking several vehicles and fatally hitting 44-year-old Brady Ortego. The victim was thrown from a bridge and into the Mississippi River. Johnson ditched his vehicle and fled the scene on foot, according to authorities, who accused the suspect of calling his grandmother, 73-year-old Marie Sally Dufresne, to come and pick him up. In a news release, law enforcement stated that Dufresne's actions prevented them from immediately apprehending Johnson. By the time the deadly hit-and-run occurred, the suspect already reportedly had several arrests under his belt, as well as a civil lawsuit alleging his involvement in an incident that left a man severely injured. According to an arrest warrant, he and a friend spent the evening out drinking at Hooters in Metairie before he struck and killed Ortego. Johnson allegedly bought 18 shots in just 3 hours and drank at least half of them himself. Investigators claim to see him stumbling around in surveillance footage that was captured before the accident. He was charged with vehicular homicide, DWI, hit and run resulting in death, and obstruction of justice. Dufresne was charged with obstruction of justice for her alleged role in the case. Number 5. Lilian Morales. Janet Concepcion was alarmed when her little boy Jojo told her in 2021 that his father planned to take him away to a farm and that he hoped she would join them. But she continued to honor her court-ordered visitation agreement with the boy's father, 45-year-old Jorge Morales II, And things continued as usual for the next year. Concepcion's worst nightmare came true in August of 2022 when Jojo disappeared from Miami with Morales and his mother, 68-year-old Lilian Pina Morales. An Amber Alert was issued for the little boy, who was captured in surveillance footage at a Walgreens in Maine 2 days later. The suspects ditched the SUV they were traveling in near the Canadian border and have not been spotted since. Investigators believe that Morales spent months planning his son's kidnapping and that they're hiding out somewhere in eastern Canada. According to the last update, they may be in New Brunswick. Both the FBI and the US Marshals searched high and low for the fugitives and the little boy, who reportedly had medical needs. Thankfully, Jojo was found alive and well in New Brunswick, Canada, and was reunited with Concepcion shortly thereafter. Both Jorge and Lilian Morales were arrested in connection with the alleged kidnapping. Lilian faces charges of custody interference and removing a child from the state. The cases against her and Jorge appear to be ongoing. According to the most recent update from November 2022, both suspects were being held without bond. Number 4. Peggy Camarillo. One day in 2022, someone broke down the door to a residence in Clearwater, Florida, and fatally shot 30-year-old Michael Conrad. According to police, the victim and the alleged killer, 21-year-old Stuart Beck, were involved with the same woman who was present at the time of the shooting. Naturally, emotions ran high among Conrad's loved ones after his murder. His grandmother, 58-year-old Peggy Camarillo, is accused of taking things too far, though, by harassing the woman at the center of the deadly love triangle. Investigators allege that Camarillo sent the woman a message on social media stating, "I have to bury my baby in a couple of days, and you know how hard that is going to be. I will not be responsible for my actions." Camarillo allegedly went on to warn the woman that her best bet is to leave town and that she'll never live peacefully as long as she remains local. The woman reportedly took Camarillo at her word and fled town due to the threats. Beck faces a first-degree murder charge, and Camarillo was charged with threatening a witness. Number 3. Teresa Hansen. 53-year-old British grandmother Teresa Hansen rang in the 2023 New Year and her 54th birthday from behind bars after allegedly killing her husband, 54-year-old Paul Hansen. The deadly incident occurred just 3 days after Christmas at the couple's home in West Cowick, when police received a report that Paul was gravely wounded. He was rushed to the hospital where he died from his injuries. Teresa Hansen, a hairdresser by day, was charged with murdering her husband of 34 years. He died from a single stab wound to the heart. According to the most recent update, the case was still under investigation as police gathered evidence and interviewed neighbors and witnesses. A month after the murder, Paul's body still had not been released to the family due to the defense team's request for a second post-mortem exam. Family members could be heard sobbing in the courtroom as the judge addressed Teresa, who denied murdering her husband. Court officials described the case as a difficult situation for all involved, and one so serious that only the Crown Court was equipped to deal with it. She was granted bail and is on electronic monitoring pending the outcome of the case, and must stay with her parents until a conclusion is reached in court. Number 2. Hester, Burke, Halter, and Lena Bartula. The cannabis compound cannabidiol, or CBD, has become popular in recent years for the therapeutic benefits it provides without the typical mind-altering effects of marijuana. But its over-the-counter availability has led to some confusing legal situations. In 2018, a 71-year-old grandmother named Lena Bartula was arrested at the Dallas airport for possessing a vial of CBD oil that she used to treat back pain. She was slapped with a felony charge, spent 22 hours in jail, and missed her flight. The following year, in 2019, 69-year-old Hester Burke Halter was arrested for carrying a vial of CBD oil in her purse at Disney World. She used the oil for arthritis pain and had a doctor's note to go with it, just in case a situation like this were to occur. Burke Halter was nevertheless charged with a felony. Luckily, both women saw their charges either reduced or dropped entirely. But that wasn't enough to satisfy Burke Halter, who was left feeling so wronged after her case was dismissed that she sued Disney, the Orlando Police Department, and the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Her lawyer, Ben Crump, said that he believed the Orange County deputies who responded to the scene were hell-bent on putting the grandmother behind bars. The lawsuit accused the defendants of assault and battery, false arrest and imprisonment, defamation and emotional distress. Burke Halter claimed that she panicked and began vomiting while being taken into custody and that law enforcement denied her proper medical care. She described the experiences of being arrested in front of her relatives and being strip-searched at the police station as humiliating. The senior citizen requested more than $18 million in damages for herself and family members who were vacationing with her at the time of her arrest. According to court records, the status of the case is pending. Number 1. Nancy Martin. In 2017, federal authorities discovered that a wealthy senior citizen from Wichita, Kansas, named Nancy Martin had skimmed money from 2 local businesses while working as a bookkeeper and parading around as a philanthropist. By the time the law caught up with Martin, her actions had left 2 physician-owned companies in financial ruin. She was indicted in 2021, at which point investigators believed she had been committing financial crimes for at least 2 decades. In reality, the true extent of Martin's crimes may never be known, and what is known is considered to be the tip of the iceberg. Her thefts cost the business owners millions of dollars in lost cash, as well as lost interest and earnings, and the ability to place competitive bids for lucrative contracts. The owners also lost valuable time with their families while they were dealing with the mess Martin created. One of the victims, Francie Eckengren, told the judge overseeing the case that she had no idea her trusted friend was stealing money. And when Martin told her that there wasn't enough money to cover basic expenses, Eckengren worked longer hours, even as she received cancer treatment. In the meantime, she was unaware that her business actually was raking in enough money, but that Martin was using it to fund a lavish lifestyle at the expense of everyone else involved. Martin ultimately pleaded guilty to bank fraud and aiding or assisting in the filing of a false tax document. Her lawyer implored the judge to sentence her to probation, citing the 78-year-old's medical issues, but she received a 4-year prison term, followed by 2 years of post-release supervision. In the judge's opinion, Martin's attorneys exaggerated the graveness of her health conditions, but he also gave her less time than the prosecution argued for. If you knew beyond a doubt that corruption was occurring at the highest levels of your local government, would you risk the potential consequences of going public with your allegations, hoping it would somehow bring change? Or would you keep your mouth shut for the sake of protecting yourself? After all, only the people who speak out about corruption have to deal with the consequences. Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.